Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. Lloyd Vance, I'm here with my tag team partner, Kevin Midget. So glad that everyone's back with us this evening. We were on a little hiatus. I was in Barbados, and Kevin, it has to show you how popular the National Football League is. I'll tell you this: we're at the resort, beautiful island, and everything, and it's Thursday night and everybody's packed around TVs and people have their different jerseys on, their hats, and everybody's talking about, oh, that's my team. This is my team. It's crazy. Everybody had a team. Everybody was excited about the draft. Um, what were your feelings about the draft? And you know, let's start with we won't say winners, but people you thought did well.
The draft has become a spectacle at this point. It used to be something in some dank room where you were lucky if you had the logo of the team's football helmet and a phone on a desk. Now it's this huge thing. Arenas, stadiums are being full. You got guys everywhere, just like just posting this stuff 24 hours a day. It's become its own living organism at this point. I enjoyed it actually. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed like our lead up into it to see where our prognostications landed or didn't land. So I mean, there's definitely some teams that did
Yeah.
better than others. There's some teams that you scratch your head and it's like, what are you thinking right there? And we'll get
Yeah.
all into that in the next hour.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. It used to be my favorite day of the season, and as I've gotten older, I kind of realized, yes, the prospects are fun coming in the door, but as you and I did a couple weeks ago with the Eagles, if you look at any team and look do a deep dive in all their drafts, you're going to probably have about 50% hit rate, and guys who you think are the guy coming in the door. The NFL is just so different than college football. It's work, and a lot of these guys. They were the best in high school and college, but it just may not equate to the pros. So we're going to wait and see. But yeah, Kevin, I'll start with a team. You talk about the ultimate head scratcher, and I want to get your opinion on this. I was talking to a lot of guys about this. Um, the Atlanta Falcons, they signed Kirk Cousins to a 331, 4 year, $180 million contract, $50 million signing bonus, $100 million guaranteed. And then they turn around in the first round, as crazy as it sounds, and they draft Michael Penix Jr. coming out of Washington and pick him eighth overall. So a quarterback who we were on the fence about, was he a first rounder or a late first rounder, second rounder, but he goes in the first round. But crazily, the Falcons take him, and what are they doing? And is Arthur Blank got a bullseye already on Raheem Morris's back?
That was one of the most dumbfounded picks I'd seen in a while. You sat there, and what do we always say about Kirk Cousins? The man can cash some checks. He got his another big check. He's good to go
Yeah,
again. But at the same time, you bring in someone like Kirk Cousins because there are some weapons on that Atlanta team. They needed a quarterback. They go get Kirk Cousins. So you're in a win now mode. You're trying to win now and make this team, especially in the division that they're in. That division's ripe for the taking right there if you get a decent squad on the field. So what do you do instead of getting somebody that can help the team this year? Let's draft a quarterback that maybe we can groom in 2 years to take over Kirk Cousins. I just don't get it. It makes no sense. The only thing I heard that, because it's like I'm trying to wrap my mind around it, they're like, well, if they keep Penix for 1 year, the trade value will have next year. You're trying to win now. You're paying Kirk Cousins to try to win
exactly.
now. I don't get it.
Yeah, yeah, Kevin. The days are long gone. The Houston Oilers drafting Steve McNair in the first round and putting him on a shelf for 2 years behind Chris Chandler and these young quarterbacks are expected to come in, play, and contribute right away. And we've seen this over and over again. I remember Matt Ryan coming in his rookie year, leading his team to the playoffs. Joe Flacco did the same thing with the Ravens. That was in '08, and Jalen Hurts had some success his first year starting for the Eagles and some other guys. And it you just can't afford to waste roster spots. Particularly, the Falcons are a team they're coming off a 7-10 season. They got a new coach. The general manager is still fairly new. When I look at them, their defense, which allowed almost 22 points a game, that was really their crying area of need for this team. You thought maybe they get some defensive line help. maybe some secondary guys, but they decided to go with Michael Penix, and we'll see how this works out. But like you said, now you have all this money tied up in your quarterbacks, and Kirk Cousins, he's 35, he's coming off Achilles. Okay, so maybe that's the reason they took Penix, but it is a win now league, and now they do have a lot of weapons on his team, a lot of riches. Drake London, Darnell Mooney is on his team, Rondell Moore. Those are the receivers, and then you have Kyle Pitts, obviously, Bijan Robinson. So, I think the Falcons, maybe they could get away with it, as you said, because it's the NFC South, and the South is a division where it's if you can get to 10 wins, it'll help you, but I just thought they could have gone another direction.
They made the pick for the quarterback, and then they tried to go defense in the next 2 rounds. Like, all right, now we're going to start adding some guys. The talent level of someone you could have taken with that pick right there, that swings the defense at what you could have gotten in that situation. And instead, they did the complete opposite when nobody thought they were going to do. So, I mean, we'll see. They could be geniuses. What do we know?
Yeah,
But I don't see Kirk
exactly.
Cousins trying to take him under his wing and help him out either. I don't know if I see an Aaron
Right.
Rodgers, Jordan Love situation, but what you're going to bring in, if Atlanta gets off to a bad start, the fans are going to turn. They're going to start calling for Penix Jr., and you're going to have Kirk Cousins unhappy. You're going to have a locker room that's going to be very torn.
Yeah, and I always say if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterback, and you got to have that guy that's the leader of your huddle in your locker room. So we'll see how that works out. Now, Kevin, I want to talk to you about the other biggest story in terms of the draft, and we're talking to Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Broad Street South Network. We're talking to Kevin Midget as usual, and the biggest story coming out of draft is quarterbacks. I know we got a little tired of it, the saturation point, talking about it leading up to the draft, but it sure came to fruition. All these quarterbacks going in the first round. We talked about Michael Penix Jr., but I'll throw a couple of these quarterbacks out there, and then you can give your opinion. Obviously, I won't go over for the fans. People that listen to the show know Caleb Williams to the Chicago Bears. Kevin gives a thumbs down. We'll see how that works out there. But you have Drake May, a quarterback who they're saying his high end is Justin Herbert and his low end is Carson Wentz. You got Drake May going in the third pick to the Patriots, and he's another guy. They needed help all over the place. But what do you think of Drake May to the Patriots?
I believe at this point, it's teams realize you can't win without a quarterback, and they just go and grab them as soon as they can. And the one thing is, and you're right, it's like they will get rid of these guys after 2 years at this point. It's like one of those. It's like, all right, Justin
Yeah,
Fields, we're moving on right there. You got Kenny Two Gloves now, the backup for the Eagles. It's people just give up on these guys now. They don't sit there and we got to stick by our pick at this point. Well, they'll move on. There's no doubt about it. I
yeah.
think the most egregious pick of quarterbacks, though, Denver going to get Bo Nix. I think
How
that
about
was a
that?
reach. That was a huge reach.
Yeah, you got Bo Nix, who you know his comp is Drew Brees is his high water mark, which I don't see him reaching, and I think Derek Carr, is a comparison, and he's a guy who, yeah, he's going to Denver, and Denver is a team that obviously they're rebuilding. And Sean Payton there, they got rid of Russell Wilson, but I just thought it was a little early for him, as you were saying, Bo Nix, and they get him at 12 overall. So that's just not where he was supposed to go, in my opinion. I thought maybe second round or third rounder. He was inconsistent at Auburn, and then he had a pretty good season last year at Oregon, and I just didn't see him going at 12, and then we look at the Denver Broncos as a whole. You thought maybe offensive line help. That's a big area they needed. Wide receiver, because the receiver was looking a little light. At Cortland Sutton, Josh Reynolds, Marvin Mims, their receiver group is very nondescript, and they could have used one of those receivers there. And offensive line was a key area as well, as pretty stocked. So now you look at the quarterback room there in Denver. It's going to be between Jarrett Stidham, oof, Ben
Yeah.
DiNucci, oh,
Oh
yeah,
God.
Bo Nix, and let's not forget, we didn't get to talk about this. The Jets sent Zach
Yeah.
Wilson, one of the bonus babies from a couple years ago, from the Jets to the Broncos for basically a bag of balls, which was like a seventh round pick, I think. So, how do you think all that's going to fit together with Bo Nix, Zach Wilson, and who do you think you got winning that one there? But clearly, I think Denver is looking like they may be one of the lower teams in the AFC West.
I think Zach Wilson is the starter of that team. I I
Wow.
still believe he's
Okay.
got potential. I think he's
Yeah.
got potential on that team. I'll put it that way. I think Bo Nix's high ceiling value is Brock Osweiler if you're lucky. I think he can win a few games for you in 1 year and then sign a big contract and then just get shipped out. Denver with Peyton, I think he's really regretting taking that job right now. He chose the wrong gig is what happened, and he's stuck in it at the moment.
Yeah, and I think he's always been really close to Jerry Jones. That's what I've heard. He's got connections in Dallas, and I thought he would wait to get that job, but he couldn't wait any longer. He was not very good on air as a talking head, and he wanted to get back on the sidelines. But Denver, with the new ownership group, the Walton Penner Group, and they wanted to bring him in. They got George Payton, the general manager there. Um, he's got an uphill situation in that division. You talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, the two-time defending champions, are in that division. Uh, the Los Angeles Chargers always kind of pretty quality team, and they're very inconsistent. Um, and Denver's just got it tough. So last year, Denver finished third in that division with an 8-9 record. Obviously, no playoffs. They blamed everything on Russell Wilson, kick him out the door to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we can talk. Well, let's touch on the Steelers now. The Steelers quarterback situation. Obviously, they didn't draft anybody at quarterback, but when you look at their situation, they bring Justin Fields over from the Chicago Bears, I think, for a sixth-round pick, and he's coming there. And the crazy thing is, uh, Warren, their running back, is on a show, and he starts saying, "You know what? Our special teams coach is thinking about using Justin Fields as a punt returner because basically Mike Tomlin has said that Russell Wilson's going to get the first shot at the starting gig." So, you know, do you really want to put a quarterback back there to return kicks? I know Slash was very successful years ago in Pittsburgh, and but I just think Justin Fields, he's a good running quarterback, but I watched him all the way back to high school. I don't remember him returning kicks. I think that'd be crazy for him to go back there, and that's a kamikaze position with all those guys coming down trying to kill you.
That kid is going to get lit up if they put him on special teams. Why would you even contemplate that? Because you have a chance here with Russell Wilson, who I think should be the starter from the get go. That way Fields can maybe sit back a little bit. Maybe the game sometimes you got to step back and watch for a little bit once you're thrusted in there like Justin Fields was. So let him sit back behind Russell Wilson. Let him maybe get a year of watching before you throw him in there. But if you throw him there, I mean, then you're going to start using him on gadget plays and everything else. And what Cordell Stewart is exactly what it is, and it usually will not end up well if you put your quarterback in those situations.
Yeah, and veteran quarterbacks do not like rotating. I remember when I was covering the Eagles, Don McNabb was there, and they brought Michael Vick in to give him a second chance. And there were situations where Vick kind of came in to games, and you could just see the continuity of the game plan just was not clicking. And they were Vick and McNabb, but you could see he was perturbed. He's like, why am I coming off the field for this guy? And everyone knows pretty much it's probably going to be a run, and there's not a lot of imaginative play design, and it'll probably be the same thing with Justin Fields if they're rotating or bringing him in like Buddy Ryan did back when we were watching the Eagles. Ron Jaworski was in there the first two downs. He'd bring Randall in on third and like 14 and say, "Make a play, Randall," as a rookie. So I just don't see it working as you were saying, and special teams. I used to watch Brian Mitchell all the time, even in like practice. I was like, man, he's nuts catching these punts because you got these guys coming down the field 100 miles an hour, and you're looking up at the ball. You got to locate the ball first and foremost, and then the players. And guys get lit up, as you said, on special teams.
Yeah, there's no way you put him back there. And the special teams guys, the punt returners, they're a different mindset. I mean, a normal person is not going to sit there and this guy's coming full speed and he's going to light you up if you catch that ball and don't call for a fair catch. It's a different kind of person that has that job. and I don't see somebody who's been in a, I don't want to say prima donna position, but the
Yeah,
quarterback position, you're the focal point, you're the lead guy. So you go from that to, all right, now go stand back there and get lit up. I just don't see it working out.
yeah. Yeah, and I remember talking to Mitchell after practice, interviewing him, and we talked to him about that. I'm like, man, you're a little. He said, yeah, I don't care. He's like, look, that's my job. I'm going back there to catch that punt. If I can make one guy miss, I can make a big play out of it, and that's the mentality you have to have as a punt returner. And as you said, if you haven't been doing that since at a young age or even in high school, college, it's just such a different skill to learn, and you can get hurt out there. So, jumping back to the Steelers in terms of who they are entering the season, last year third in the AFC North. We know that division is very tough. You got the Ravens, you had the Cleveland Browns also made the playoffs. Uh, Cincinnati was in the mix for quite a while, even though Joe Burrow got hurt as well. They're getting him back. So Steelers were 10-7. They go to Buffalo, get lit up in a wild card round. We thought that would happen, but I think with Kenny Pickett now with the Eagles, Russell Wilson last year, as bad as some people talked about him, particularly my buddy Rich. He and I would talk. He thought Wilson was done. He had 26 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions last year. So he's coming there to solidify the Steelers attack. The Steelers went heavy in the draft on their offensive line, which was an area they needed. They got uh, Fatunano from the University of Washington, a tackle. They got Zach Frazier, a former wrestler who is at center from West Virginia. So they got those guys coming in. And I think that's going to help the Steelers a lot. Do you think they can gain some ground on the Baltimore Ravens? They did not pick up Najee Harris's fifth-year option. So, I know that's kind of a question mark there, but what do you think about the Steelers going into next season?
As we know, they will finish 500 or better. That's a given. So we'll get
Yeah,
them the other couple of games. They lost Deontay Johnson, I believe, went to Carolina. He's no longer there.
yeah,
So you have Pickens there, and also the kid they drafted with their third pick, Roman Wilson, they brought in a wide receiver. So you add that with Fryermuth at tight end and with the running back situation, they're going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're going to sit there. They're going to be fringe playoff team, if not make the playoffs. And it depends on the play of Russell Wilson, how deep they can go.
yeah. And because last year with Kenny Pickett, they scored less than they allowed. So they allowed, you know, they scored 304 points and allowed 324 points. So as well as their defense did, allowing only 19 points per game, their offense was only putting about 18 points per game. Surprisingly, at home they were 5-4 last year. Now, if you want to talk about a silver lining for the Pittsburgh Steelers, they were 5-1 in that division, so that shows you they can beat those teams. And if Wilson can give them a little consistency there, I think, as you said, they're going to win at least 9 games plus, and maybe 10, trending 11. And maybe contend for that division. We'll see there. I think it's going to be a little tougher with Burrow coming back, and we'll see what the Browns have, and also the Ravens where they're at in their space. So that's the Steelers. As we shift gears, obviously here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 109 The Game, the Broad South Network, we like to focus a lot on the Philadelphia Eagles because Kevin and I are both in this area, and it's a team that I followed as my youth, and Kevin still kind of follows them. The Eagles, everybody once again, but I know we beat up Howie for some of his last picks and some of his bonehead picks. Rieger over Jefferson. We won't pick on him about that, but Kevin, everybody's saying Howie Roseman won the draft this year in terms of his picks, and like I always say, it takes 2 to 3 years to judge a draft. But man, they knew the Eagles had the glaring need and on their defense, particularly in their secondary, and they went heavy there. And they in their second pick, and well, he wasn't a first rounder, but the second round pick was a guy I had targeted. We'll talk about him, Cooper DeJean, in a second. But how do you think they did overall? And what are you thinking about Kenyon Mitchell, the corner they took from Toledo?
I think that nobody that is a Philadelphia fan is going to be able to boo Howie on this one because everyone's celebrating and setting up parade routes right now.
Yeah,
On paper, it was a great draft. It was an absolute great draft. You got the one of the fastest guys playing cornerback out there. You brought in Mitchell. Then you go get DeJean. He fell to them. He absolutely fell to him. I read a couple things saying those are the two best defensive backs in the draft, and you sit there and got gobbled both of them up. Once again, we've seen because of the Lito Shepard comparisons and on Sheldon Brown and everything. You went and got those two guys, and Howie really didn't have to do anything. He kind of lucked into it. It fell his way. And you know how hard it was for Howie not to be Howie and try to jump up. And he sat on his hands and he
Yeah,
let it just happen. And like I said, on paper, it looks great. And we'll get into the back end, too, adding the legacy member as well that everybody around the city wanted.
right. And you talk about the Eagles, and you look at their draft, and the thing with them, as you said, they had to fix that defense, but the draft was so heavy offensively. So many quarterbacks going off the board in the first round, offensive tackles, receivers. We had a couple, I think, a tight end, and then these defensive guys were sitting there. And Kenyon Mitchell, a guy who from Toledo, everybody said, yeah, he's a small college kind of guy, but he went to the Senior Bowl, played very well. He's about 6'2". He's very long. He's that new corner that everybody wants, a guy that can, play that bump and run style, and he's long and has some length. And he was a good pick. They were right there for him. And then in the second round, the Eagles did do a lot of trading up and down. I think Roseman may have set the record within the draft, but you're right. Cooper DeJean was there. He was their guy they targeted. We talked about all along. The Eagles were looking at him. Everybody's talking about the next Jason Sehorn and all that stuff there, because he's a white DB. But we'll see. Besides that, this guy's talented. Forget all that. He, as you said, he went to the combine. He lit it up. And I had watched him in the Big Ten at Iowa, and he's a guy that showed he can cover. He covered Marvin Harrison Jr. pretty well in that game. He came off his broken leg after the season and looked healthy. The Eagles jumped up. They traded, I think it was Chicago, and they got to the 40th pick, and there he was. And you could see the excitement in the room as they get Cooper DeJean. Now they're going to move him around in terms of formation. I think he may help at the nickel, may help at free safety. They'll see if he can cover it on the outside, but they're going to use him in a variety of ways. And he's one of those guys. He doesn't mind returning kicks too, as well.
Yeah, the way one of the rumors I heard, and once again, they're rumors. You don't take them. You take them with a grain of salt, But it's like, why was Howie making all these trades? Why was he accumulating these draft picks and this and that? And the rumor was
Yeah.
about Saquon Barkley. In case the league comes around for tampering, they've got draft picks to kick away.
Oh wow, I didn't even
And
think
that's
of
what
that. Yeah,
I heard that, and I was like, Howie's not a dumb guy. I was like, it kind of makes a lot of sense, but once again, you never know when you hear stuff like that. Howie, he filled some needs, and surprisingly enough, went and got a running back, a wide receiver as well after all
right.
that. So he didn't forget the other side of the ball.
Yeah, yeah. So as we go down, after we talk about DBs, everybody's so enamored with you. You have Jalix Hunt. He is a small school guy. First, he went to an Ivy, and then he transferred to Houston Christian. We'll see about him. They gave him number 58. We'll see. He's another Trent Cole out there with that number on. He's able to hunt the quarterback, and um, third round they need him to contribute because then the Eagles kind of waited and they traded out their other third round pick and their next fourth round pick, and then the fourth round, as you said, they get Will Shipley coming out of Clemson, a guy who's known for catching the football out of the backfield. I thought he was a nice pick. They get Aeneas Smith, a receiver from Texas A&M, in the fifth round, and then as you alluded to, everybody wanted him, and we had talked about it too. They never draft linebackers, but there he was. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., an inside linebacker from Clemson. I think he's a true thumper. They're going to bring him in. He's going to compete with Nakobe Dean. I think he may beat him out because we know Nakobe Dean's been an underachiever since they brought him in. And then they give Trotter Jr. his dad's number 54. So, how excited were you to see Jeremiah Trotter Jr. come to the Eagles?
I was middle of doing something. I believe I was at work, and I sit there and I'm like, because it gets to the later round, things take a little, it just feels like it takes longer. Your attention span isn't the same focused on. You're doing other things. And I looked down my phone and saw who the Eagles picked, and I chuckled to myself. I'm like, they actually took him. Nice. It's a feel-good story.
Yeah.
I mean, if it works out and that kid becomes any kind of player, how happy is everyone going to be? Come on.
Yeah, it's crazy. And maybe they do listen to this show because we talked heavy about they got to get Trotter Jr., they got to get Cooper DeJean, and you know we'll see if these picks work out. But those were some exciting times for the Eagles, and then they get it. They got a guard in the fifth round from Michigan. We'll see about him. They got a really big receiver who was almost like an H back, Johnny Wilson, coming out of Florida State in the sixth round, and then they finished their draft with Dylan McMahon, another center. Everybody's trying to say, "Oh, sixth round pick. He's the next Jason Kelsey." We'll wait and see on that.
Yeah, no pressure there. Yeah, yeah.
But overall, great draft for the Eagles. And when you look at the snapshot, obviously, of the season, we know that they lost six out of the last seven games, second in their division, 11-6. Um, it's going to be interesting for them because I would have to put them leaders in the clubhouse in the NFC East because we know things are such in flux for the Dallas Cowboys. Uh, what are you thinking in terms of Jalen Hurts? Is he going to have a bounce back season? They've seemed to have given him everything he wants in terms of weapons, and then they extended so many of these young players. Devontae Smith got his deal. You had Landon Dickerson, an offensive guard, get his new deal. And then the other big one was I think they signed A.J. Brown as well. So what do you think in terms of the Eagles and Jalen Hurts?
I think the Eagles have written a lot of checks, and I think when you have that much money
Right?
tied up into a handful of players, these draft picks have to pan out. You're doomed if they
Yeah.
don't because you're just stuck at that point. You have to draft well. You have to get these guys on the field, and they have to contribute. I think there's other things that they have to look at as well. I'm not so sold on Dallas Goddard. I need a better
Yeah.
backup tight end. I need someone who can come in and fill in 3 or 4 games because that's what's going to happen at some
Yeah,
point.
and that was a position you and I had targeted in terms of needs for the Eagles. I have it on my notes here. Second tight end, Goddard's been very banged up, and I looked at it. He was a second round pick in 2018, so he's been on the squad for a little bit. And I don't think Calcaterra. I don't think he's the answer. I don't think Albert O, who they got from Denver. I don't think he's doing much. And there's a couple other guys on the roster. So maybe in training camp they'll get lucky. Someone will get cut or something. Uh, or they get a street free agent signee. But yeah, that second tight end position is looking a little late. And we know that Kellen Moore likes to use his tight end in his offense. So that's going to be interesting there.
I do want to say, though, I believe, alluding back to Jalen Hurts, because he's had some ups and downs, he's been in the league a little bit now. And I think how he plays this year, for better or worse, that is the quarterback he's going to be. This will be the big telltale year. He's been in the league enough years now. It's like this is going to be who he is going forward. And hopefully for Philadelphia, it's for the best.
Yeah, hopefully. I know the fans are excited for him, and he's got to have a bounce back year. Last year I think it was 23 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. He just cannot throw the interceptions. He just had so many painful interceptions, particularly late in the season, that hurt this team, and they just couldn't overcome them. Games, the turnovers just killed the Eagles. They were on a plus side the year before when they went to the Super Bowl, and last year they were negative. So they got to find a way to protect the football and also get turnovers on defense. So we're still talking about the draft and team previews here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football 1029 The Game, Broad Street South Network. I'm here with Kevin Midget. Kevin, I got to get your opinion on this one. With the second pick of the draft, and we knew this was earmarked there, and they made no bones about this was their guy. The Washington Commanders decide that they're going with Jaden Daniels. Um, what scares me about Jaden Daniels? And he's going to Washington. He reminds me a lot of RG3, another former Heisman Trophy winner, slight build, likes to run around, and you just wonder, can he take the pounding in the National Football League? Um, what are you thinking in terms of the Eagles' rivals in the NFC East, the Washington Commanders, and how they did?
I think Jaden Daniels has the potential to be the best quarterback coming out of that draft. I think he could be that guy. I think he has enough weapons there where he can be competitive early. The key is for him, and he's lucky he doesn't have Mike Shanahan there to ruin his career like he did RG3's. Sitting there running, the guy's limping around on one leg, and he's calling run play bootlegs still. Is it just me that remembers that? It's a Seattle
Oh, I
playoff game,
remember
I
it.
believe.
Yeah, and he even says this day, RG3, he's on ESPN now, and he says he should never went back in that game, and his career arc just never changed after that moment.
Exactly. But going to Daniels, though, I think he has the tools, especially how the game is played these days as well. You don't have to be the drop back passer and sit there and take your 3 step drop and see what happens and let everything open up down the field. You need a quarterback that can create some time, create some space, get in the lanes where there aren't arms in the way, and I think he has that ability.
Yeah, and I think Kevin, Washington needed him. You look at their team; they have some holes. I know they've tried to rebuild some of their roster. Bringing Dan Quinn over there, he's a new head coach. Cliff Kingsbury's going to run that offense, and then you have Joe Witt running to defense. So, in terms of their offense, their quarterbacks were before Jaden Daniels were Marcus Mariota, Jeff Driscoll, Jake Fromm. That just shows you they needed a QB. I think Daniels will start from day one for this team, and they're going to want to get him on the field, and he's going to need some help though. They bring Austin Eckler over. You wonder how much he has left at the running back position. Zach Ertz is now their starting tight end. They probably need more than him. And in terms of the receivers, they do still have Terry McLaurin, a guy who's very underrated around the league, and Johan Dotson, who I think was better at Penn State. He really has not picked it up in the NFL. And then they get the Eagles, Olamide Zaccheaus there too. So, what are you thinking in terms of Washington? And last year they finished fourth in the division with a 4-13 record. Where are we looking in terms of them?
I think them, the Giants, and the Cowboys, not that far away, are all going to be hanging around 7 wins. I think the Cowboys are going to be more like 9, but I think the Giants and the Commanders are both around 7 wins. Could be like 6 to 8, somewhere in that middle. I think the Eagles have this division. If everyone, once again, everyone has to stay healthy. That goes without saying. Everyone stays healthy. I don't see the Eagles being challenged in this division at all.
Yeah, and we know this division every year they've had a different champion. So last year was Dallas's turn. The Eagles will get that second place schedule, and that will be more favorable for them. So I do agree with you that they're the leader in clubhouse, the NFC East. We'll see how that turns out for them. I wanted to talk to you about another team who's in your area, the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens continue. I always like what Eric DaCosta does in terms of his team, and they stick to their needs. They usually get top players. Um, they knew they needed offensive line help because they made a trade. They sent Moses over to the New York Jets, so they had to kind of figure things out in terms out there. But they did get Nate Wiggins that corner that we had talked about that did not like tackling folks. Nate Wiggins, they
Mm-hmm.
get him in the first round at the 30th pick. I thought that was a good spot for him there. He'll fit in well there. They have other hitters, so they need a guy who can help shore up that defense. Roger Rosengarten, a tackle from Washington there, and then Adisa Isaac, linebacker from Penn State. So they went and filled needs for the Ravens, and we'll see if they did a good enough job. But it seemed like they kind of were concentrating on that offensive line.
Well, once again, if Lamar Jackson's not healthy, you have no team there. Even though they brought in Derrick Henry, and you have to wonder how much, as we spoke about Austin Eckler, how much does Derrick Henry have left in the tank? That's a guy, that's a large man who's taken a lot of hits over the years. I mean, he hasn't backed down from one hit either. He levels it just like he gets it. And the thing I worry about Derrick Henry is Baltimore going to overuse him? Are they going to try to give him the ball 25 plus times a game? Because he's getting older now. There's some tread off the tires, and that could be a wear down factor come playoffs.
Yeah, and you have Todd Munkin there, and like you were saying, they're such a run heavy team. I think they led the NFL in rushing yards last year, and you know Lamar Jackson 821 yards last year, and we'll see, as you said, Ken Henry come in there and replace it because they were kind of like a three-headed monster last year. A lot of their backs, you know, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, they're going to play for the other hardball out in the Chargers. We probably can talk about them in a minute, but they decided to replace those guys with Henry, who's 29 years old. Last year, as you said, he had 280 rushes. So he's running the football, and in terms of his catches, he had over 300 touches, and that's a lot for a 29-year-old. And we'll see if he's able to continue to move the chains. A big guy, obviously, they're trying to work around and see if he has anything left is Ronnie Stanley. They're great left tackle from 2016, first round pick. He's missed 36 games though over the last 4 seasons. So they need somebody else to step in on that offensive line, and I think that's where they concentrated. I think they took 3 guys on offensive line trying to help that out. Receiver for the Ravens is another area. You wonder about Zay Flowers. He may have some legal issues going on. Um, we saw Odell Beckham leave as a cap casualty. I don't think that's a big loss for them, but they really only have Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar are their receivers. Their top 3 at this point.
Yeah, and Bateman's looking like a bust as well. He was a high draft pick who's never really panned out. I look at him as Baltimore's Freddie Mitchell, is what it is.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Oh
very
man.
much so. Uh,
Yeah.
Nelson Aguilar, if he becomes your second, third receiver, you got some receiving problems. Zay Flowers did show talent, though. Now, if he can hopefully avoid any other off the field problems and stay on the field, I think they actually hit the nail on the head with that one.
Yeah, and Baltimore last year scored. They were fourth in scoring with 483 points. So they put about 28 points per game, and their defense we know was first in points allowed, only allowing about 16 and a half per game. So this is a good team, a physical team. But obviously, I always like to say when it comes to Ravens, Lamar Jackson, it's playoffs or bust. Unfortunately
Oh,
for them, nobody cares about the regular season. They got to get. They did finally win a playoff game, but then they lose at home in the AFC Championship game to Patrick Mahomes. That leaves a sour taste. So, in terms of the Ravens, though, they gave Lamar Jackson his money. Are they ever going to be able to get over the hump with him? I mean, I tend to think 2-time MVP, great regular season player. I just, in the playoffs, just something is amiss with him and the team.
I just think it comes to a point where they rely so heavily on Lamar throughout the season, and when they get to the playoffs, you're going against the better defenses, and you're going against the better defensive coordinators, and those guys know how to. I wouldn't say stop Lamar. They know how to corral him a little more where he can't do the things he normally does during the regular season. And that's where they drop the ball. They have no other backup plan to step up. And if you go back to even the Randall Cunningham days, all right, Randall, go do this, go do that. And then when you get to like crunch time, playoffs, and everything else, it's like, oh, they kind of, shut him down a little bit. And that's what's happening with Lamar.
Yeah, and he's got to lean on some other folks. And a big name we didn't talk about yet, but I wanted to bring that up and get your opinion on him. Mark Andrews, a great tight end. He's had a great career in terms of two-way tight end. He's a great blocker, good in the red zone and moving the chains and so forth. But the thing is with him, he just can't stay healthy recently. And you have Isaiah Likely, who's that new tight end where you kind of move him out in space and things. So they have a good 1-2 punch. Um, do you think that Andrews can be healthy and help this team bounce back?
Andrews is becoming the guy. I don't want to say like Chad Lewis or somebody like that, but it's once a guy starts getting hurt and these nagging injuries once
Yeah.
one after another, they're not going to suddenly become healthy again. It's going to happen at some point, whether it be 4 weeks into the season, 7 weeks into the season, he's going to get banged up again. And I do actually like Isaiah Likely. He has a nice skill set right there. He can catch the ball. He's a bigger guy, but I think Andrews starting his career is starting to turn to the downside.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of Mark Bavaro. He was just
Yeah.
so good running over people, great blocker. But then, like as you said, as his injuries came along, he just was not the same player. So, they'll need him, and I don't think they really drafted a tight end. So we'll see if he's able to have a bounce back. Now, a team we got to talk about here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029, the game brought you South Network, is the Buffalo Bills. Now, a huge story this off season. Uh, they said enough's enough with Stephon Diggs. They send a diva receiver away. They sent it, go away. So send them to the Houston Texans, who we can talk about in a minute. And they, they're redoing their whole receiver room. They just signed Chase Claypool of all
hmm
people. We'll see if
hmm
he's able to get back to his rookie form from when he was with the Steelers. They did draft in the second round, and he was their first player taken, Kenyon Coleman from Florida State. He also played at Michigan State at the uh, number 33 position. So I think he's going there. He's going to try to help out Josh Allen. But in the rest of their draft, they seem to concentrate a lot on The offensive line and the defensive line got some DBs as well. So, when you look at the Buffalo Bills, they had that great run at the end of the season. To end the season, 5 straight wins to win the division. They beat Miami in a game that counted, Week 18. Um, do you think Buffalo is a team that can? What are we thinking in terms of them? Can they stay on the top of that AFC East, which just seems to be so competitive?
I think Buffalo had a short little window there. They had a couple of hard luck playoff losses, some epic playoff games that they were on the wrong side of. With the receiving situation that they have right now, we all know about Josh Allen, how he throws picks in the red zone, trying to force some things to happen. I like what they're doing with a double tight end with Kincaid and Knox. I think that works
Yeah,
well for him. I like how Cook played last year as well in the running back position. But Coleman, I'm looking at him and I'm like, the size and everything looks good. He could be a good receiver. I saw he ran a 4.6 40. That's not fast.
yeah,
That's not fast at all. So it's like, and you put Coleman out there with two tight ends. You need somebody to stretch that field a little bit.
yeah. And I guess they'll be counting on Khalil Shakur, who had a pretty good season for them. And then they're bringing over Curtis Samuel from Washington, who's another smallest receiver. But you're right. You just wonder who's going to be that number one receiver for them going forward. And maybe they think, Sean McDermott's their head coach, and he was always with the Eagles when the Eagles, they're like, Thrash and Pinks are okay. So maybe he thinks they don't need that number one diva receiver who can be a pain in the butt. But I think when you go in that direction, yeah, they have the tight ends, but I just don't know about Cook. Is he that lead back where they could continue to throw the swing passes and he can have a lot of catches for them and difference making plays? He did have some bad fumbles in key situations for them. They're also redoing their defensive secondary. Both their safeties, they moved on from them, and now they're going to have Tyler Rapp back there and Mike Edwards. So, um, yeah, I tend to agree with you that the Bills got hot at the end of the season, but it's going to be tough for them to maintain where they were. And they did give Sean McDermott and Brandon Bean, their general manager, the dreaded vote of confidence. They gave them both extensions. But you just got to wonder if the owners of Peculiar's there, if they're going to say, "Come on, we need we need more," after a while, because I know they're tired of seeing the Kansas City Chiefs continue beating them and winning.
I just look at your with Cook. Him and Isaiah Pacheco. I put in the same kind of category, around the same age, and it's like, is it just the new age back right now that we're not going to see Derrick Henrys anymore? They're these guys that can get out in space, they can catch the ball a little bit, and that's how they're going to get a lot of their touches as well. It's not going to be the 25 plus carries. I think that day's almost come and gone at this point. So, but you at a point you almost need two running backs then.
Yeah, you do, and we're seeing a lot of teams go with that two-headed monster rather than that bell cow like Adrian Peterson was for so many years around the NFL. And you got to talk about we'll segue from the Bills and we'll talk about their nemesis and the team. Everybody always wants to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, the two-time defending Super Bowl champions. They decided, they're looking for their next Tariq Hill. And they bring Xavier Worthy from the University of Texas, and he was the fastest player in the draft, and they bring him in at 28th pick. They trade with the Buffalo Bills to get him, and inconsistent receiver, but he's a guy that's going to be able to stretch the field for them, and with Rashee Rice, who may have some off the field suspension type issues looming, they bring in a receiver. What are you thinking about the Chiefs? They also give Travis Kelce an extension. He's coming back for the next couple of years, and you're going to see him and Taylor Swift some more. I know you'll love that. But what are you thinking about the Chiefs and going in next season?
I will say one thing with Xavier Worthy. He's fast. He's freakishly fast. It's like if you would
Oh
just
yeah,
catch the ball a little
what
bit.
you want?
It's like back in the day. Remember, everyone was trying to get the track guys to be wide receivers. Ronaldo Nehemiah. You had James Jett with the Raiders, and it's just like just catch the ball and you're gone. That's what it is. I like the pick actually. I almost look at it as like un-Andy-ish. I was like, it's not an offensive lineman or defensive lineman, with your first pick, and they went and got a tight end as well, like about two picks later. And it's like, all right, you give Kelsey his extension, so are they going to try to do more double tight end things now as well?
Yeah, and they decided, they go worthy at the 28th pick in the first round. In the second round, they get Kingsley Sumate. I hope I'm saying that right. He's from Brigham Young, a big offensive tackle at 63. And then in the fourth round, as you said, Jared Wiley, tight end from Texas Christian. And then they turn around and get a DB right after him, Jaden Hicks from Washington State. But they were looking at needs, and they were just filling holes. And it's almost for the Kansas City Chiefs, their luxury. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They know they got Patrick Mahomes. They're the two-time defending Super Bowl champions, and they're just Brett Feaster, general manager, Andy Reid. They're just trying to fill holes and just make that roster as good as possible. And they'll go with the best 90 going into training camp and then go from there. It's going to be interesting. That receiver core, as I said, they got Hollywood Brown there, a guy who kind of underachieved when he was with the Ravens, and then he went to the Cardinals, and yeah, he's got the name, but the game sometimes does not live up to his big play name. And we have Rasheed Rice, as we said, the guy that was drag racing, and I think the league's going to come down on him. Kadarius Toney is still on the roster, a guy who had a lot of drop problems. Sky Moore, another guy who had a lot of drop problems. So they still, I think, have pretty good receivers. They got to fix that offensive line because other Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey in the middle were very good, but then you have Jawan Taylor, Mr. False Start, um, at right tackle, and then the other tackle position was hurting. Kelsey, what did you think in terms of that extension? Is he too old? Can he continue to play with such a dominating fashion? Another 1,000-yard season. What are you thinking in terms of him?
I think I'm tired of seeing Travis Kelsey's face on TV. That's what I think I'm tired of seeing. I look up at the Kentucky Derby. I look at Kentucky Derby. It's a picture of Travis Kelsey there. I'm like, all right, the guy's having a great life right now. Leave him off the TV screen. I
Yeah.
get it. He's having
Oh my
fun.
goodness.
Is it to the point with Travis Kelsey? Is he getting paid for what he's done, or is he getting paid for what he can do in the future to help this team? Might be a little of both. And once again, until someone tells me any different, that guy's going to go out there and he's going to ball. And he's got
Yeah.
2 years in him. I definitely believe that. I think that's money well spent.
Yeah, Mahomes is 29, 30 years old. He's still got a lot of years left to continue to play at high excellence. And we'll see if Carson Wentz jinxes this team, though. Maybe he's the mush for them. They bringing him over as the backup. But as we were saying, they're loaded all over the place. They're trying to fix that defense that I thought played particularly well. They had some defections on defense, but they did get Chris Jones signed. So I don't see them slowing down anytime soon. They just own that division, and we'll see how they go from there. Um, Wanted to hit on a team. The Chicago Bears had the top pick in a draft. We talked about that. Everybody said, "Oh, winners and losers," and they said, the Bears did a tremendous job. We got to wait and see. Caleb Williams, we'll wait and see who he's going to be. A lot of people are saying he's another Dak Prescott. We'll have to see, but yeah, Caleb Williams. Then they got Roma Dunzi in the first round with the number ninth pick. That was their own pick, and then they got an offensive tackle from Yale in the third round. They got a punter in the fourth round. Sometimes I think unless you're an X-ray guy, you don't take a punter number in the fourth round. And then they
No.
got Austin Booker from Kansas at defensive end. So they only had 5 players that they drafted, but everybody's talking about this Bears team. What did you think of their draft in them in going into this off season?
I think they did what they had to do. As much as I am not a big Caleb Williams fan, you had to take him. There was no doubt about it. You had to take him. The potential outweighs the fact of the USC cursed quarterback. So I get why they took him. And as a Chicago fan, I'd probably be mad if they didn't take him at that point. Because you know why? I want to know. If he's a bust, so be it. But it's like you got to find out. It's like you got to draft that guy at that spot. Adunze, that was a great pick actually, and I like the fact they brought in Keenan Allen as well. Keenan Allen can still play. He's an older wide receiver at this point, but you have a wide receiver with that kind of experience to go with a young quarterback. If Caleb Williams is receptive, what Keenan Allen tells him, there's things he can learn from Keenan Allen. So that could help
Yeah,
them out. And you get an offensive lineman because at the end of the day, you got to protect Caleb Williams.
yeah. And when you're talking about the Bears, you have Matt Eberflus, their head coach. He's on the hot seat as well as their. I don't think their GM Ryan Poles is. He's still fairly new with the team, but Eberflus definitely has to start winning. His team was 7-10 last year, fourth in their division. We'll see if they're able to gain some ground on some of the other teams, and we'll talk about their rivals there because I think one of their rivals didn't have a good draft, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But the Bears, when I look at them, you're right. They have DJ Moore now. They brought him over last year. He started to do some good things. Keenan Allen, Roma Dunzy, who was kind of under radar. Everybody was talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. and some of the other receiver prospects, but Roma Dunzy is a very solid player. I watched a lot of University of Washington games last year. He can run a lot of routes. He has good hands. Offensive line, that was an area of need. We'll see if they're able to shore that up because, as you said, you've got to have Caleb Williams upright for them. And then at the running back position, they bring over DeAndre Swift, who did some good things for the Eagles. I think the Eagles didn't really use him enough, so they have him. They add him to Khalil Herbert and some other guys. And then defensively, they're going to try to build around Montez Sweat, who they traded to get in the middle of last season from Washington. So I think Chicago can jump up. I was talking to a guy on my vacation. He was a Chicago fan, and he was saying, I think they could be the surprise team. They could be that team that jumps in and gets a sixth or seventh playoff spot coming out of nowhere. It happens, but I think that may be a stretch.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, the schedule that they're going to get to, Caleb Williams is going to be C.J. Stroud of this year. Is because there's one quarterback in the rookie class that usually steps up and does really well, like things you didn't think about. And is it him? Maybe. Maybe. But he has all the potential. He's got everything on paper says he should be good. But once again, what do I lead with? USC quarterback. That's all I'm going to say. USC quarterback.
Yeah, yeah. Now, one of their rivals, I was alluding to this. A lot of people I talked to around the league were like, when they talk about winners and losers, and we're talking with Kevin Midget here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Broad Street South Network. When you talk about winners and losers, they all were like, "What is the Minnesota Vikings doing?" That was one of the teams. Yes, they lost Kirk Cousins, but they were the ones they jumped up and they had to have him as a quarterback. You and I were like, everybody's telling him in the first round. Is he the guy, not the guy? They jumped up to the 10th pick, trading with the New York Jets, and they took J.J. McCarthy. I did like their other pick in the first round of Dallas Turner from Alabama, a very good pass rusher. But then they did not have a pick again until the fourth round. They took a DB from Oregon, and then they only had picks in the sixth and seventh round. So, they're betting a lot of their draft on JJ McCarthy. So, what are you thinking in terms of the Vikings, and is McCarthy the right guy?
Am I a fan of J.J. McCarthy? Absolutely not. Do I think he's going to do that well in the NFL? Probably not. But if I'm J.J. McCarthy and I'm going in the league and you give me Justin Jefferson, I have Addison on the other side, you got a fighting chance, man.
Yeah, yeah,
If you have any ability, start me out with those two wide receivers. That's the best scenario he could have walked into.
yeah, and he's going to have some players around him. Last year they were 7-10 team, and Cousins did a lot of good things for them, but he had some turnover issues. Usually for a young quarterback, his favorite players are a tight end, which they have. It's T.J. Hawkinson, who's a very good tight end, and a running back. So they bring in over Aaron Jones from the Packers, who was down the stretch last year. He was dominant. I guess the last 5 weeks of the season, he was getting 100 yards plus. If he's healthy, he's a very good player. So we'll see if coming over to the Packers, he could do some things for the Vikings. So, as you said, a good landing spot for McCarthy in terms of the people around him. I just don't know if, at 10, that was the right spot for him. I still think he may be in a product of a very good lineup at the University of Michigan. And when I look at the Vikings overall, their defense had to have a makeover. They allowed more points than they scored last year. They allowed 21.3 points per game, one of the lower teams in the NFL. They got to do a better job. And in terms of the division, they were 2-4. So kind of limped home down a stretch, 1-4 in the last 5 games. And we'll see how this is going to go. Kevin O'Connell, a lot of people think he's one of the great young minds out there, but McCarthy will have a good coach in him. But I thought that might have been a reach for him at the number 10 position.
You're looking at about the next 2 years, maybe 3 years. NFC North could be the best division in football. You've already got the Packers and the Lions. The Packers are set up. They're so young. So many players under 26, and you sit there.
Yeah,
You got two rookie quarterbacks now with Chicago and Minnesota. If they play well, that division's stacked.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, we'll say right in that division, talking about um, who did well, didn't do well, and looking at teams in terms of the draft. The Detroit Lions, everybody's talking about them. They bit off kneecaps, and their team that they snuck up on a lot of people last year, and they just kept rolling with it all the way to the championship game where they lost to the 49ers. They were 12-5. They were able to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Rams in early rounds of the playoffs. So, this team is one of the big talking points around the National Football League. And Denver, what they did was, I'm sorry, Detroit, what they did was they decided to fix that defense. We know their defense allowed way too many big plays. They almost allowed 400 points last year, allowed 395 points, which is puts them about 12th in the NFL, around 23 points per game. A lot of shootout games. They did score a lot, about 27 points per game, but they had to fix their a defense, and they go with Terrion Arnold, defensive back from Alabama, who like the guy like what happened to Eagles. He kind of fell to them. They were happy to grab him there. They traded up with the Dallas Cowboys, and then in the second round they got Ennis Rakestraw from Missouri, and then in the fourth round they had Giovanni Manu, a tackle from British Columbia. In Canada to an offensive line that we know is one of the dominant in the league. So, what are you thinking about the Detroit Lions? I know you said this division is still going to be very tough. Right now, do you think they can defend that title? Where are you thinking in terms of the Lions and what they did in the draft?
I think right now I would say Green Bay slightly ahead of Detroit, but I like Detroit. St. Brown, the way he played last year. Laporta, what a great pick he was. You have a guy who could be a Pro Bowler for the next decade. You got a tight end right there. It comes down to Jared Goff. Is Jared Goff going to be able to sustain the level that he's playing at right now? He's not going to get any better than he is right now.
Yeah,
I think
yeah, yeah.
he
Now keep going. You were freezing up there a little bit.
now if Goff has a fallback regression season, then Detroit is going to go in a different direction. But if he can sustain how he played last year, they're legit.
Yeah, and I think they're going to give Golf an extension. I think he's in last year of his contract. They're trying to work that thing out. But when you talk about the Lions, their offensive line is stellar. You have Taylor Decker, you have Glasgow, Frank Ragnow. Kevin Zeitler now comes over at right guard, coming from Baltimore, and then you have Panay Sewell, one of the best in game at right tackle. So, a lot of weapons there for them. Jameer Gibbs played very well. Obviously, Aaron Glenn and that defense, they got to pick it up there because, as I said earlier, allowed too many points. But they're bringing back Marcus Davenport, a defensive end who's bounced around. He was with the New Orleans Saints mostly early in his career. And then they're bringing over Carlton Davis at the cornerback from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they're bringing in a lot of new faces, whether it's free agency or the draft. But I do agree with you that the Lions are going to be a tough team. I think they still will be in playoff contention. When we talk about the Green Bay Packers, another team, 9-8 in the regular season, and they got into the playoffs. And then when they did, you're like, wow, okay, this team's kind of they're fun to watch. And Jordan Love, things started clicking with him. They beat Dallas in the wild card, and then unfortunately for them, they ran into the Niners, but in the divisional round. But they did have a very good showing. The big change for the Packers, they're bringing over Josh Jacobs from the Raiders. He's going to be their new running back instead of Aaron Jones, who I talked about. They have a slew of young receivers. And in the draft, they knew they had to fix the offensive line because Dave Biacchiari finally excuse me, retired. They bring in Jordan Morgan, tackle from Arizona.
It comes down to it. It's like their bread and butter is going to be that offense. If Jordan Love has taken the step that we think he's taken, then they can sit there and they can play with anybody, as we saw what happened against Dallas. Like they just went in there and started punching. They didn't. There was no off switch on them, and they are a fun team to watch. Probably one of the more fun teams to watch in the league. So, and I don't see them. I don't think Jordan Love's hit his ceiling yet. That's for sure. He's going to evolve and probably even get better than he was last year.
Yeah, and Jordan Love has so many weapons. Christian Watson, if they can keep him healthy, he's dangerous. You have Romeo Dobbs. I really like Jaden Reed last year, the rookie, from Michigan State. He played very well for them. And then their offensive line, they're going to build around Elton Jenkins. So defensively, they got to find some more guys other than Quay Walker and Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary. They got to get a little bit younger on defense, but I think they are a team that's going to be in a mix as you move into next season. As you said, that division, you look at the AFC North, that's a tough one, and then the NFC North as well. So I couldn't let you get out of here though, Kevin, without talking about not our favorite team being from Philadelphia, but everybody's always talking about Dallas Cowboys, and they've been so quiet this offseason. Now they had kind of like a push button turnkey draft because they knew they needed some offensive line help, and they just stood back and they kind of stood back. So they get Taylor Guyton in the first round at number 29 overall, a big tackle from Oklahoma. Marshawn Nealon, a defensive end from Western Michigan, in second round. And then they went offensive line again with Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State in the third round. And then they went with a linebacker who may have been a little bit of reach, Maris Liafu, coming from Notre Dame in the third round. So, what do you think with Dallas here? And I'll give you my opinion first. Dallas, everybody seems to be a lame duck this year. The quarterback's on the last year of his deal. They didn't pick up Trey Lance's fifth-year option, so he's on the last year of his deal. And then you have the head coach, Mike McCarthy, who is in last year's deal. I think Jerry Jones is going to be like, you know what, we're going to roll with what we got, and I'm going to blow this thing up if it doesn't work.
My thoughts are this team stinks. They are not going to be a good football team. They did a classic old Philadelphia move. It's like we're going to take nothing but linemen right now. They have so many glaring holes right now. The fact is, Dak's going to be unhappy. It's going to lead to CD being unhappy because he's going to want the ball. Mike McCarthy's going to be unhappy. You know who else is unhappy? Micah Parsons. You know where Micah Parsons wants to play? That guy wants to be an Eagle so bad. He comments on every move the Eagles make.
Yeah, his social media
was players
so
like
funny.
The Eagles get.
How about it goes? They're so freaking lucky to get this guy dropped to him and all that. Like, oh, Micah, it's not a good look. You look like a whiner, man.
He wants to be an Eagle so bad, but this team right now, it's going to blow up after this year, but they are going to be a bad football team at points this year.
Yeah, they were 12-5 last year at that magic carpet ride in the regular season. They led the NFL in terms of scoring. They scored 509 points, 30 points a game basically, and they had all those blowouts, but it all like I was talking about the Ravens, it comes down to playoffs with them, and they were terrible in that game at home, and they lost very badly, and the Packers took the guns to them, and they were embarrassed. So, and then this offseason, when you thought, okay, maybe Jerry Jones has learned his lesson, he's going to turn over a lot of pieces of his roster, but he's just running back pretty much with the same unit with a couple new guys here and there. Obviously, they have CD Lamb, one of the best young receivers in the game. With you talk about Dak and his inconsistencies. Yeah, last year led the NFL in regular season touchdown passes with 33, but he was just awful in that playoff game in terms of turnovers, looking tentative in the pocket, taking sacks. And that offensive line, always their calling card. As Teron Smith's moved on, he's going to the Jets. And then you have Zach Martin, who's near the end, their all-pro right guard. So I do tend to agree with you that Dallas is going to take a step back, and we're going to have to see where they go from here. Before we get out of here, one of the teams I got to ask you about, and everybody always talks about them because they were on Hard Knocks last year. And it's Aaron Rodgers. He's the golden boy of the league. Everybody likes him, but he's almost 40. And what are you thinking in terms of the Jets this season? This is another one of the team. When I was talking to people, in the airport and other places, they were like, "Oh, the Jets could be a bounce back team." Do you think the Jets can get back in the mix? And in terms of the draft, they took Oli Fasanu out of Penn State with the 11th overall pick. They knew they had to get better on the offensive line. But did they do enough? And where do you think the Jets are going to be?
In a situation where Aaron Rodgers is healthy all year, I see them. They could win 10 games. They could be in there. They could be 11. They get a wild card. Uh, Shoot, I don't know. In a perfect situation, they could challenge for the division. But once again, is Aaron Rodgers going to be able to stay healthy? And if he doesn't, there goes their team. I like Garrett Wilson. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a really good up and coming wide receiver for a whole year. And when you have a quarterback that's approaching that age, it's hard to guarantee that he's going to be healthy the whole year.
Yeah, I do agree with you. They couldn't be in the mix. They finished third in the division, 7-10 last year. They lost a lot of close games. Their offense was just putrid. They finished 28th in the NFL, averaging only about 16 points per game. A lot of people are obviously going to blame that on Zach Wilson and his struggles and not having Aaron Rodgers other than 4 snaps. Rodgers is the key. So we'll see what he can do there. But they got some older guys surrounding. They brought Mike Williams over from the Chargers. He's one of the receivers they brought over. Teron Smith from the Dallas Cowboys. We'll see if he's able to stay healthy again. Last year he played about 13 games, but he's had a pretty good Hall of Fame career. But I think he's near the end as well. They bring over John Simpson from the Baltimore Ravens. Morgan Moses, another Raven. It comes over in the trade. But like you, I do like some of their weapons, particularly Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, who's just explosive um, running back that they have there. I think they do need a little bit more at the tight end position. They have Tyler Conklin. We'll see if they have enough there. Defensively, that's their calling card, obviously, for Robert Salah. Who's on a hot seat. Um, they got to get play out of Hassan Reddick, who we both said last time we talked that the Eagles kind of got snookered there and traded him to them and may have got the better deal. Basically, trade for Hassan Reddick for Huff, who the Eagles now have. So, yeah. But and you Zach Wilson, I guess they were just glad to get rid of him. But do you think that they're able to survive, or they're just going to be more of a wild card?
I think they have for them, the way they're built right now, it's a 1 year push. Try to get 1 year out of Aaron Rodgers where he hangs MVP numbers again. If you're a franchise that hasn't won a Super Bowl since the moon landing in '69, you're pretty much going to take 1 year of getting to a Super Bowl and trying to win again. So I get it why they're doing it. It's like we'll go all in on this, and then after Rodgers, we'll try to draft the quarterback and do something again, to build everything up. Because you have other younger guys on this team. You just need to take advantage of it with the 1 year Rodgers or two possibly that he has left.
Yeah, and they did in the draft. We'll see if he's a quarterback in the future. But in the 5th round, they did get Jordan Travis from Florida State, who's coming off a pretty bad knee injury. I did like him last year at quarterbacks. It's one of those dual threat guys, can move around. So maybe he could be their quarterback in the future. He'll be able to learn from Tyrod Taylor and Aaron Rodgers there. The last team we're going to look at here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football on 102.9 The Game and the Broad Street South Network is the Houston Texans, who were the darling of the league last year. Everybody talking about them as a surprise team and made the playoffs and won a playoff game and then lost the divisional round to Baltimore, but they were 10-7 last year. CJ Stroud, the rookie of the year. Um, they didn't have a first round pick because they traded up last year. They did get Kamari Lassiter, DB from Georgia, with in the 2nd round, number 42 overall. Blake Fisher, a tackle from Notre Dame at 59 overall, as well in the 2nd round. And then a DB, Callan Bullock from Southern Cal, in 3rd round, 78th overall pick. So, what are we thinking of the Texans? They're much like the Lions. They're not going to sneak up on anybody this season, but can they maintain that excellence? And they won the AFC South next year. So, what are you thinking with them and their draft?
I think they did the right things they had to do. They added some secondary help and an offensive lineman. You have to once again you got to protect C.J. Stroud. Their offense is going to score points. It's inevitable. They're going to hang some numbers, so they need to keep the defensive side of the ball to keep the other team score down. They can score with everyone. I think it's just the fact they need to get the defense on the same page as the offense right now. But yeah, I think yeah they're the team of the future that's popping up right now. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and their offense coordinator Bobby Slowick's talking about him as that next guru to get a job around the NFL as potential head coaching candidate. And then you have obviously D'Amico Ryans, who did a great job with them. D'Amico's going to try to fix that defense that allowed. They scored about 22 points a game, but that defense also allowed about 21 points per game. So a lot of shootout games for them. They'll probably try to fix that defense. As I said earlier, they beat Cleveland in the wild card round, which was a good win, and then they lost at Baltimore. I do like what this team's done in the offseason. It's going to be interesting to see if they're going to have enough balls for everybody because, you got Stephon Diggs coming over there from the Bills, and he was already complaining there. And you got Noah Brown, you got Nico Collins at the receiver position, and Tank Dell. So they have Robert Woods. They have some other, a lot of receivers there. And then they have a very good tight end, Dalton Schultz, who they got to get the ball to as well. And they bring over Joe Mixon. So a lot of offensive weapons. A lot of people say, oh, they're a fantasy football team. But, I do think I tend to agree with you that the Texans will be very dangerous as long as CJ Stroud doesn't regress
Yep.
in his second year, which we've seen some rookie years do. Anything else you want to jump on as we close it down for another week here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network?
I just want to throw out one little shout. I like what the Chargers did in their draft. I think Joe Alt was a slam dunk. And you have that guy now on the line once again for the next decade. And I like the pick of Lad McConkey also because they needed a wide receiver help with that Chargers unit, losing Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. So to put him out there with Quentin Johnston and Palmer as well, you had to add a wide receiver. So I thought they did a good job there.
Yeah, the thing is with the Chargers, is all about Harbaugh's coming over. He's bringing that pedigree. They were 5-12 last year, and there's nowhere to go but up. But I think he's going to make this team a lot better. Now you have Rashawn Slater there. You have Alt, as you said, on that offensive line. We'll see if they have enough in terms of the receiver position with Quentin Johnson, some other guys. But yeah, I think the Chargers are another team that could jump up and scare some people. So I appreciate everybody joining us for another great week here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Broad Street South Network. Thanks for Angel for producing, doing a great job. Thanks to Kevin for being involved for another week. I think we did a good job talking about the draft and talking about team needs, and we'll continue just hitting on all the big topics around the NFL weekly and talking about the teams because the NFL never sleeps. So talk to you next week. Thanks for joining us.